You know, sometimes one conversation can change how people see an entire conflict. Watching Piers Morgan debate Professor Jeffrey Sachs feels exactly like that. Piers represents the Western mainstream narrative, confident, emotional, and ready to defend the usual talking points. But then Sachs enters the room, calm, analytical, and devastatingly honest. Within minutes, you can see Piers struggling to keep up as Sachs starts breaking down the truth about NATO, Ukraine, and the motives behind this endless war.
Russians have said repeatedly every day, we know how many people hate us. This is clear. They hate us in Britain. They hate us in France. They hate us in the U.S. We want to get to the root causes. We don't want just a pause. Because of Starmer, because of Macron, because of Lindsey Graham, because of the CIA, because of everybody, they told Trump, no, you can't say anything about NATO enlargement. And all of that discussion ended. And it's extremely dangerous. Medvedev is absolutely right. Making ultimatums to Russia that are first unenforceable, but are provocations and escalations. Oh, my God, it's sad for us. It's sad for us as watching this thing. This is not honest. It's not leading anywhere. It's not going to end the war, but it could escalate the war.
Jeffrey Sachs, a rather ominous way to end that.
Thank you.
Russia's economy is actually growing because of its extraordinary spending on weapons and because oil, once bound for Europe, is selling freely in China and India. That's why former President Medvedev, a close ally of Putin, says that every deadline is a step closer to a far more dangerous situation. Each new ultimatum, he wrote, is a threat and a step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with Trump's own country. So who's going to blink first, Trump or Putin? And what happens if neither of them do, or if they both go to war? Professor Sachs, great to have you back on Uncensored. Let me just ask you, just straightforwardly, if Trump in a few days launches a massive tariff war against Russia, will it have more impact on the Russian economy than the sanctions strategy, which doesn't appear to have worked?
I don't think so. I think that Trump's threats are basically unenforceable. Russia is exporting its energy to Asian countries, especially to China and India. Both have made clear that they will continue to import Russian oil. The U.S. already has demonstrated it does not have clout vis-a-vis China in a trade war. I don't think Trump's threats, therefore, really amount to an end of this war. The problem is that what the Western countries are demanding is not a peace agreement. They're demanding a ceasefire. They're not ready to talk about actually the underlying causes of the conflict. And that's very frustrating because the war could end in a day. It could end in a week if there was more honesty on both sides about what should be done.
What makes this debate powerful isn't just what Sachs says, it's how he says it. He doesn't shout or accuse. He simply presents facts that are impossible to ignore. He reminds everyone that wars don't happen by accident. They are built, planned, and justified by those who profit from them. When he points out how Western leaders and media shape public opinion while avoiding accountability, Piers has no real answer. You can almost feel the moment when the truth starts to weigh heavier than the argument.
I mean, Trump clearly feels disillusioned with Putin because he feels that the tenure of their conversations they've been having bears no relation to what Putin then does. In other words, he says all the right things in the phone calls, but then immediately launches the biggest ever bombardment of Kyiv, for example, after the last call. So Trump now feels he can't trust Putin. But from what you're saying, is that because if you're Putin, you're thinking, well, why do I need to do anything here when it's obvious to Russians that the problem here is the problem they've articulated, the encroachment of NATO onto their border, they have to protect themselves, and so on, the arguments that you've put forward before, and that Putin therefore feels there's not much that America can do about this, short of actually engaging in direct military action, which they're probably betting will never happen.
Yeah, Piers, you're exactly right. But a strange thing happened. In the initial discussions when Trump first came in and he sent Steve Witkoff to Moscow, they talked about real things. They talked about NATO enlargement. They talked about how that had to stop and so on. It looked like they were moving towards peace. Then the neocons all over the place in Europe and in the United States said, no, 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 NATO can't be on the table. You can't talk about these real things. And the discussion from Trump and the Western leaders in general just shifted towards ceasefire and unconditional ceasefire. We're not going to talk about anything other than ceasefire. And Putin said, I don't get it. Well, he didn't. I'm putting words in his mouth or paraphrasing. He said, but we were talking about ending the conflict. Now you're talking about a ceasefire. And the Russians have said repeatedly every day, we want to get to the root causes of this. This is not just a delay for another attack by the West. We know how many people hate us. This is clear. They hate us in Britain. They hate us in France. They hate us in the U.S. We want to get to the root causes. We don't want just a pause. And the Western leaders never came back to even a moment of basic discussion about NATO, for example. Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, concluded the recent NATO summit in The Hague by saying Ukraine is irrevocably going to be a NATO member. Well, duh. You know, how are we going to have a peace if the Western countries are basically saying we're not going to discuss anything other than what we demand? So it's a kind of a conversation of the deaf on both sides. I mean, Trump may be perturbed that he's not getting his way, but maybe he doesn't understand. The first days of discussion between the U.S. and Russia were completely different from what's happening right now. There was real discussion about the real issues of this war. I know that because I spoke with the Russian side, I spoke with the American side. It was actually moving towards a peace. It really was. Then suddenly, because of Starmer, because of Macron, because of Lindsey Graham, because of Dick Blumenthal, because of the CIA, because of everybody, they told Trump, no, 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 you can't say anything about NATO enlargement, and all of that discussion. And so this is a kind of a dialogue of the deaf, and it's extremely dangerous. Medvedev is absolutely right. Making ultimatums to Russia that are first unenforceable, but are provocations and escalations. Oh my God, it's sad for us. It's sad for us as watching this thing. This is not honest. It's not leading anywhere. It's not going to end the war, but it could escalate the war.
Jeffrey Sachs, a rather ominous way to end that, but I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
By the end, it's not about who won the debate. It's about who made people think. Sachs didn't just challenge Piers, he challenged everyone watching to question what they've been told. Whether you agree with him or not, his calm conviction exposes how rare real honesty has become in modern media. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes this moment unforgettable, because truth still matters, even when it's uncomfortable.